And a quick heads up. I know I've spoken to some of you about our grad program and maybe getting a head start on grad school. Um, we just got our updated program approved yesterday, and our grad program is moving to an all online program. So you'll be able to take the courses in any order online. So that might make it more compatible for some of you to get a jump start. Maybe your so this is your most of you are sophomores, right? So your junior, senior year. And I think maybe it would be possible to maybe end up with a master's with like one extra semester, something like that. And that would be pretty beneficial from a uh, salary range perspective. And you can take a lot of those courses under your undergraduate tuition with our early start program. But you would have to take heavy loads, right? Because you're still going to you can't double dip the classes. You still have to do 120 credit hours of undergraduate work. And you can't count a grad class as part of that 120. There are additional things on top of that. But if that's of interest to you, we can certainly look forward at your schedule and try to be aggressive so you can maybe get a jump start on the program and end up with a master's relatively quickly after undergrad. Typically, our best students are coming out with starting offers with a bachelor's degree at around, let's call it 65 to 68. And then with a master's degree, it's 75 to 85. So if one semester gives you that big of a jump, that's not bad. Plus you can do it online, so you can work while you can start at some place and say, I'm almost done with my master's, and maybe negotiate in that higher salary. Yeah.
For our like 21 elective credits, can we double dip those since they're like?
No, you can't double dip anything.
Okay.
Yeah. So, well, okay. I want to make sure that I'm doing truth in advertising here. For an undergraduate degree at Concordia, you owe the school 120 credit hours. Mm-hmm. To be a major in computer science, you have to take the courses that we require, and that's part of the 120. Mm-hmm. Then you have to take the courses that are part of the Common Core that are required. That's also part of the 120. So 120 minus the Common Core minus your computer science classes is the number of free elective credits you have. Mm-hmm. You still have to do those free electives at the undergraduate level to give you the 120 hours. Okay. Now, you could take grad courses towards the 120, but they won't count as grad courses. So you can't meet the undergraduate 120 credit requirement and also be working towards the 30 credit graduate program requirement. The classes won't count double. So if you want a master's degree, don't take master's to meet your undergrad credits, which is kind of frowned upon anyways. You can do it at the same time, just the credits will count in the grad program, not in the other undergrad program. So in order to complete the undergrad program, you have to have 120 credits of undergraduate coursework. To complete the graduate program, you need 30 credits of graduate coursework. It used to be 36, now it's 30 in the new program. But all of you would be able to start the program definitely as seniors, possibly second semester juniors. You'd have the prerequisites for the starter classes. We'd have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis probably, but punchline would be that you have the necessary background to take the classes, because there is, in the new program, there's no overlap, or there won't be any more than, let's call it 20% overlap. So if you had an undergraduate operating systems class and you take the graduate operating systems class, 80% of that graduate operating systems class is a different class. It's a new or different or whatever. It's not a repeat of what you had at the undergraduate level, which is, I think, somewhat different than we have now, since our program right now has catered to people coming in without undergraduate degrees in computer science. So the new program, I think, is a much better program. But yeah, basically, you can't double dip. Be aggressive, get both of them as quickly as possible. It's online, so it doesn't prevent you from starting your career post undergrad and finishing your master's in another semester, max a year. You shave probably at least a semester off, even if you don't go crazy aggressive. Just try to get a couple of jumpstart classes while you're still in your undergrad. It still will work out. So, highly encourage you to do that from a salary and trajectory perspective, because the bachelor's degree, unfortunately, has become the new high school diploma. It's not the way it should work. If we roll back, this goes back to the old stories, it's like, oh, I used to walk to school uphill both ways, and school used to be so much harder, and things like that. I think those are true statements, but I think what gets misplaced is so often in higher education, we blame the modern student as being worse. And, so I've been teaching for 20 years, and one thing I would say is true is that the best students are as good as they've ever been. It's the average student that is, quote, worse. But what does worse mean? Well, I think the students today are smarter than they've ever been. God made us to be problem solvers, and we solve problems in terms of the tools that are in our toolbox. All of you have a lot of tools in your toolbox. You got a really powerful one in Google, right? And we say that kind of jokingly, but if you think about the number of things that you can solve with a simple Google search, young people today have had less practice critical thinking because you haven't had to do it. You've had this power tool that you've mastered and been able to leverage for years and years and years. And now when you get to kind of higher education, which is, let's call it, dragging behind the times from it's still more traditional than it is keeping up with the modern trends. All of a sudden, you're being expected to be masters at critical thinking like you would have been 20 years ago, when maybe you're not so great at that because you have a lightsaber. You have Google. You can get your answers. Like, you want the right answer? Here it is. I'll just talk to my phone and give it to you. Make sense? So really, the students today are probably smarter than they've ever been. And that's lost some of that critical thinking that what the master's degrees end up bringing back in, because what we've done is we've lowered the bar at the bachelor's level. I don't think any of it is things that we're proud of, but it is not a Concordia thing. It's every university you walk through the door thing. I look at the University of Illinois, which is a top 5 school in computer science where I started. And, I see the classes that are coming out of there. I went and talked to my old advisory back there. And the students that are getting degrees today in computer science from what's considered a top 5 school in the world in computer science looks a lot different than it looked 20 years ago. A lot different. And so it's across the board. It is what it is, but you guys are not you're not stupid. You're just, you're too resourceful for your own good. Maybe that's the thing.
So, sometimes going to a certain university for a degree doesn't matter where you get a job, or what type of job you're looking for. Would you say that has an effect with computer science? Would you say graduating here with a computer science degree in either a bachelor's or a master's is going to affect your pay gap or whatever job you get versus going to more prestigious schools?
I think the short answer is depends. I think it will make less of a difference today, and it will make a difference only at a very small subset of companies. So, for example, if your dream is to work for Google, let's use that as an example. Google will hire from places like Concordia if you're the special candidate. One of the things Google does is they have kind of a test that gets you through their door. And but I bet you if you took a survey at Google of the people they've hired with computer science degrees, you will find a lot of Carnegie Mellon, MIT, Stanford, what are considered to be the very, very, very top prestigious schools. So maybe the better question is, does having a master's from Concordia, which obviously is not MIT, right? So does having a master's from Concordia put you at a disadvantage of having like a master's from Oklahoma State, something like that, which is a perfectly respectable school, but not a top tier computer science school, for example. I don't personally believe so. I think you'll, not really have a major issue with that. But if your ultimate goal is to work for some famous company, and I really think Google is kind of an outlier there. Google typically hires a lot of PhDs, where typically I would tell students to a master's always makes sense. Sometimes a PhD hurts you. There's plenty of people who have PhDs in computer science who have decided to go out and work in industry rather than education that don't mention their degree on their resume, because the presumption is that they'll have to pay them too much, something like that. So they basically just claim their master's degree and not their PhD. So I think masters always benefit you. I think a PhD only helps you if you want to go into teaching.
Sure.
Or research and development or something. But again, Google is an outlier. They do tend to hire PhDs at a pretty high pay scale.
Okay.
So I guess the short answer is no. It doesn't make a difference. With the outlier being very specific companies, it would.
And does a lot of that actually have to do with like for example, like more prestigious like computer science schools, would they have like, I guess, a better program, or is it just name? Like,
I don't know either. I think mostly it's going to be name. I think you can go to a school that has a very prestigious high ranking or something like that, and they can have a garbage program, and you can find a diamond in the rough program that doesn't have any sort of ranking and has a really cool program. But programs are constantly changing, constantly evolving. I mean, our program's changed 3 times here in the last 5, 6, like I guess the last 8 years. And I think especially in technology, programs change pretty often. So I don't think more prestigious equals better program. I do think typically more prestigious by the typical rankings, U.S. News or something like that, probably equals more research experience for the students, maybe a little bit more engineering focused. I think typically the hardware focused degrees have, and I think this is more of an example of the higher education dragging behind reality. Because for a long time, hardware was where things were. You got the better motherboard, you got the better this, that, the next thing. It was always the new board. Well, now hardware and software are becoming much more mixed, where we have programmable logic boards. Arduinos are a good example, and that's why Raspberry Pis have become pretty popular. Where our hardware, even our cheap hardware, has gotten so fast that you might as well have the flexibility of writing software on that hardware to make it do stuff, because we really don't need faster hardware for a lot of the problems we're solving. So I think you're going to see in the computer world things move more towards software-based computer science degrees. Not that engineering isn't still a very important thing. I mean, we have our buildings need to remain standing, right? So you need structurally sound engineered buildings and stuff like that. But I do think computer engineering will change and become more and more software, where I think we're already very software-based here. Yeah, it's probably, you can't judge a book by its cover. You really got to look at the program and see what they're offering and see if the classes kind of speak to you. Like, are the classes they think are important the classes I want to take? Maybe not. But I'm not sure. I would look at the name first.
And then, this might be out of your realm of answering, but like, at least for UW schools, whether it's private or like public, would you know like how our our program differs, or like, because I know a lot of it sometimes revolves around mathematics, like a lot of computer science programs involve a lot more mathematics. and ours is more theory and just kind of like understanding, stuff like that.
What was more theory?
What's that?
Was more theory.
Was more theory. Yeah.
It's
So, like,
shifting.
I don't know. I guess I'm just like trying to think because I can't think of a lot of UW schools off the top of my head that have like a very focused computer science degree. Because a lot of the time when I ask my friends when they go to different universities, they always say we have a terrible like computer science program. Like I'm thinking about transferring, and they never think about coming here. So I was just like wondering like if you had an idea like what schools have a decent computer science program other than here.
Yeah. So I mean, I can kind of work backwards. So I don't know that there's such a thing as a good computer science program and a bad computer. Well, there probably is a such thing as a bad computer science program. But I think there can be many different good computer science programs. But I really think, and I've mentioned this in class before, that 90% of what you'll learn outside the classroom. The classroom gives you the bug, and then you go outside the classroom and start doing things, meeting up with people on Saturdays, working on some software, stuff like that. Communities like that will exist at any university.
Right.
So at that point, your college experience is kind of what you make of it. Now, having said that, I can look at, like our program and whether it's the program that created this or it's the students within the program that I've had some pretty good groups where you had students who 5, 6, 7 students who on a regular basis kind of met outside and learned some stuff that was beyond what they were getting in the classroom. We've gone into to these hackathons, programming competitions, and beat teams from like Stanford and MIT and things like that. Just recently, Austin Winkler went to a hackathon at MIT, and he had 2 people from MIT in his team and wasn't really impressed with them. So I think part of it is this idea of more prestigious school equals smarter kid, equals smarter, better program, things like that. Even in our recent thing of redoing our program, so much of that had to do with marketing, what you call the classes. What's actually in the class can be all sorts of things. What you name the class, how you market the class, that's what sells. So I would say that most programs are probably going to be either bad or acceptable. I think it might be very difficult to differentiate between the acceptables in computer science programs. And I think like I said several minutes ago, that the best students are as good as they've ever been. So I think if you seek out those outliers, the folks that are willing to come in on a Saturday or willing to meet at 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night or whatever and work on some side project, some app that does something, you learn so much from doing that kind of thing that you're just not going to get in the classroom, or at least not at the pace that you want to get it. And that's what changes your education, not what's happening in the classroom. The classroom, it gives you some sort of guaranteed checklist of, you've been exposed to this topic, and at that point you have this degree that says, I have a bachelor's in computer science, which roughly means I've probably seen these 15, 20 things. At which depth, start flipping coins. Who knows? And you're going to have some bad results at MIT, you're going to have some bad results at Bob's University. So it would be very difficult. Like, I said, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where I started, that's where I grew up in that area. They're they're a top 5 school. Yet, would I say they're better than us? I probably wouldn't. I think that we have access to more modern tools here. So one of the nice things that we have is a budget that we can spend on toys, where a lot of universities, they're so big and like these, almost like a government,
Right.
that things don't move very, very quickly. But that isn't to say you can't go and find some other, medium or even large school. Sometimes you have, small departments in a very big school that ends up being a much more small department feel, I guess. So it's a coin flip. Madison has a great program, but it's more of a research program. You have lots and lots of research opportunities. It'll probably be more hardware based, although they do have a software engineering emphasis. But you're not going to close any doors getting a degree from Madison. So I think the best advice is get a master's from somewhere. And then go learn what you need to learn yourself. Ninja. All right. Anything else? Go ahead.
A little bit off topic, but
We're so far off the reservation.
yes, we are. Is there any information about the 3D printing training?
Yes. Well, not official information, but the makerspace is ready for the training. What we're figuring out now is whether we're going to let people print directly or not. So I think we will in fact, I'll tell you what, I'll commit to this today. I will send out a thing over our Slack channel. We'll do initial training for within the CS department to show you how to use the printers, how to slice stuff, maybe things that you maybe have done before, but how to use the better tools, that kind of stuff. And we'll give a little bit more technical background and show you how to use the printers. What we're deciding is whether or not we want to give people direct access to the server to be able to send remote prints, or have you work through either me or Blade for getting stuff on the printers. I think for computer science students, we can probably do more with direct access. So I think that question we're trying to answer has more to do with the more general population of the university. Do we want a psychology student necessarily uploading stuff to one of the printers on their own when, maybe there's less oversight or something like that. I don't know. But I'll commit to getting an announcement for computer science specific training for early next week. Let's go something like that. Maker announcement. Because we do need to get rolling on that. Because now it's all set up. Everything's stable. We have 17 available machines with 12 more coming. So you can, and at this point we're just printing out Mr. Gonzalez's big beautiful black body parts. We got the hands, we got the skull. Have you been down there and seen the new skull? It is a thing. Hey, you have to take that up with Mr. Gonzalez. He's on Slack.
I don't want to take it up.
I don't want to take it up. Something like that. They'll probably murder me this week or something.
You never know. I mean, we can just say, talk to Mr. Gonzalez. He has a Slack account and he does respond.
I'd be scared.
Okay. So let's dive into our stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
But the punchline from all this is every single one of you should be looking at a master's degree. That's an unfortunate truth about today, but do it anyways. The amount of money you'll spend extra on a master's degree and the amount of time is dwarfed by the amount of extra money you'll make over your career. So it makes so much sense. Okay, so last time we talked about singletons, right? So kind of an easier way of getting things between activities in our application. Singletons, keep in mind, are not necessarily attached specifically. This isn't an Android thing. Okay, this is something that exists in any sort of programming paradigm. If you have multiple objects and they need to share stuff among each other, a good place to put it might be a singleton. Now, I also don't want to throw the PutExtras model for activities under the bus. If you need to send information from screen 1 to screen 2, and that information only needs to be shared between those two screens, the more appropriate solution might be to use the extras ability of an activity rather than start making your singleton get messy. You know, if you're writing, right now we're writing 2, 3, 4 screen applications. If you think about, a major project you might write for a phone or something, you might have 30 or 40 screens. And if you start using a singleton to share everything that might need to be shared between any of those screens, you're going to have a pretty messy singleton pretty quickly, where you're going to have to start using crazy naming conventions like screen2 underscore screen3 underscore username underscore age, something like that. That's your variable name. So you know which thing it belonged to. Yeah.
Would you avoid using a singleton when there is a lot of contributors to one application? So if you have like 8 writers.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Not just out of hand. I don't think I would just out of hand avoid using a singleton. That has more to do with project management. So I think if you have too many contributors to a project working on the identical screens, then you're already kind of playing with fire.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean anything. I mean, if a screen is sufficiently complex, you can just further break down a screen into sections of the screen. So you might have them contributing to the same singleton file. Maybe one person adds 2 variables, another person adds 4 variables. In the end, when those 2 will get merged, you'll have 6 variables in there. Yeah. So that's not a deal breaker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were you saying the put in get extras and singleton kind of do the same thing, just in different ways?
Yeah. So let's kind of articulate that in a slide. Something like that. Singleton versus PutExtras.
Yeah.
Singletons share info among, let's say, everyone who has access to the singleton. So it's effectively a global repository for your application. PutExtras is the ability of an activity to share info between itself and one additional activity through an intent. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't daisy chain them together. You can, with PutExtras, have screen 1 send something to screen 2, screen 2 grab that, and then send it on to screen 3. You can do that. Now, at that point, you might say, so where's the tiebreaker? When do you decide which tool to use? You might say, rule of thumb is to use a singleton when you need to share the same info between 2 or more, I'm going to call it screens, or screens, maybe could be objects, could be several other things. Rule of thumb is to use extras when you need to share info with a single single screen. I want to say additional.
So it's kind of like protected versus public.
Yes, but it's also out of sight, out of mind. Because what's happening if we draw a picture for this? If this is screen 1, screen 2, screen 3, I can actually, let's do the arrow. I can pass information from one screen to another screen through the intent using PutExtras. So this is PutExtras from intent. Whereas the Singleton version of this, remember I kind of named my Singleton core. This guy knows about Mike. And all of these guys can get to core. So that's the Singleton model. Now, we might say this is kind of out of sight, out of mind. We're only going to see this code, you know, when we are transitioning from this screen to this screen. We'll be kind of packing that suitcase and, you know, sending it along with the intent. So it's kept inside the logic between those two screens and doesn't leak outside of that. Where if I have 3 screens in my application or 5 screens in my application or 1,000 screens in my application, and I'm sharing stuff through this single core, this guy's going to get pretty messy pretty quick. Yeah, go ahead.
So what exactly is the benefit of using the set extra?
I would say the benefit is code organization. If you only need to share stuff between 2 screens, it would be in your best interest to do that through extras so that you don't overcomplicate your singleton that might be used for sharing among multiple screens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
With the PutExtras, the data only gets sent when you change the screen, right? Like when you go from that screen to the next.
Yes, but some data is passed by address, so it could be changed by somebody else, and then it does have a permanent change. But it gets sent when you package that intent. But what you're sending is a pointer to another place in memory for some types.
I'm guessing that using the PutExtras model is significantly slower than.
I would say not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be slower. Definitely not significantly. I don't think it would be perceptible to a human.
Okay.
So if you were making an app with like 1,000 screens, you said the singleton can get pretty messy. How would you?
You can have multiple singletons.
Multiple.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you can do that type of thing where you can have multiple singletons and have, you know, those guys, you know, get messy in and of themselves, but that would still be the convenient way of getting stuff shared between more than 2 screens. Now, if you go back to this rule of thumb here, you could maybe change this to say more than 2. Maybe you decide kind of the tiebreaker is if I need to only share a piece of information between 3 screens, maybe I still use PutExtras in a large application just to protect against having too many things shared. Or, kind of as you were pointing out, maybe we have more than one singleton and you have a singleton for the relationship between those 3 screens, and you have another singleton for the relationship between 5 other screens, something like that. Ultimately, it comes down to human beings organizing stuff. What does that look like? Make sense? You know, if you're organizing your family room, your idea of what might be a good way of organizing it might be different than somebody else. So this is where personal coding style comes in. But I think it's fairly safe to say that don't just arbitrarily put everything in a singleton, especially when you're working on a larger project or collaborating with a lot of people, because it's going to get pretty hard to manage pretty soon, right? Similar to, I think I've used the example in class before about junk drawers, right? Every house kind of has a junk drawer, but do any of us really know what's in that junk drawer? It's junk. That's where you throw stuff. You found it on the, paperclip, junk drawer. A die-cast airplane, junk drawer. Why? Junk drawer, right? So think of your singleton as kind of like your junk drawer. You want to keep it somewhat organized so the stuff in your singleton is all office supplies or all, I don't know, silverware, whatever. Things that are related to each other in some way. All right, make some sense? All right. So what I'm going to do right now is I want to go back to my main screen. Now, do I have this going to something yet? This employee list, does it take me to a screen yet?
Yeah.
Very basic.
Yes.
I think it's just like a text view.
Good. Okay, good. So I already have that screen. All right, so we're going to go to that screen. Here's my employee list screen. And let me... bump this guy up to like 40. Perfect. Now I can even see it. Where is my stuff? Palette. Now, this is all normal. My eyes suck. Actually, my eyes are fine, but I choose to wear contacts instead of trifocals like I'm supposed to. This is a life choice to not see. You'll understand. At some point, you'll hit the age where you just stop caring. So look, I just like the way contacts feel. I don't care that I can't see that great.
I can't see anything anymore. I'm just like,
I spent enough time in VR that contacts just make sense. So.
my dad hasn't even spent a minute in there. His eye vision sucks, and he's still able to hit a deer for some reason. I don't know how he's able to do that.
He hit a deer?
He hit a deer.
Well, I mean, anybody can hit a deer. Sometimes deers run at your car.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with vision.
No, I meant hit a deer with an arrow. Let's put it that way.
Oh, he hunts.
Yes.
So his vision is good enough to aim at an animal and
But he can't see anything. But he usually can't see anything far away, which I don't get.
Oh, see, mine's the other way. With my trifocals, I can see stuff close up. But with my contacts, I can see way better at a distance. So they're great for golf. Terrible for looking at a computer monitor.
Yeah,
The fact that there's even text on the screen is fairly insignificant to me right now. All right. Go ahead.
Now, for the text, shouldn't there be a unit after the text for the text field?
Who?
So under the text size, shouldn't there be like a unit for that? Or
I don't think so. I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess if you pick it out of here, maybe it puts it there.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe one of them is independent of pixel size or something. Yeah, I'm not sure how it handles it. Okay. But what we're going to look at today is how to do lists of things. When we might want to have 500 things on the screen filled with lists. And then I'm going to have you for your homework connect some dots. All right. So I'm going to go into, I think it's containers. And we should have... Oh, I really don't want to do it with a recycler view. Yeah, I want to go to legacy. I'm going to do it with the list view. If you go and Google this, you're going to find what I'm about to do done more modernly with something called a recycler view. It's fine. It helps with some performance and stuff like that. This is a cleaner way for me to kind of show it to you. It'll get the job done for us. So I had to find this under legacy to make it work.
Okay, so for us, there's a way to do it with recycle view.
But don't do it.
Don't.
I'm just going to say don't do it for right now. Do it with, once you learn how to do it with list view, transitioning to recycler view makes a lot more sense. But going from nothing to recycler view is confusing. So we're gonna do it with list view. So you'll find that under legacy. So it's like an old way of doing it. I'll go ahead and drag this list view out here. And I'm gonna call this guy my list view. Actually, we'll call this guy for, what are we doing? Employees here? Employee LV for list view. Okay. So now I have this list views in there. It's this scrollable thing. We want to see how we can make this guy work. Because right now, this guy doesn't have anything in it. Okay. So I'm going to go to my screen employee list activity. And we'll go ahead and give ourselves access to that list view. So I'm going to say private list view, employee LV. That was what I named it out there. And then inside of onCreate, I'll go ahead and hook that up. I'll give myself programmatic access to that guy. So I'll say this dot employee LV is equal to this dot find view by ID r.id dot employee LV. So now I have access to that list view. Okay. Now, if I run this application right now, there's nothing on this screen. We have a list view, but you know what? The guy I was just looking at here, where is it? This guy? I'm not seeing this. This is my design version showing me that, hey, this is something made for showing lists of things. All right. Now, how do we programmatically hold collections of things? Arrays. If we want to hold an arbitrary number of things, we talked about array lists, right? Okay, so we have collection types. So whether it's an array list, whatever, that's the data. That's where our data will be held. So I'm going to go in here. Here, that one? Yeah, there we go. Nailed it. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and create a string array called the strings, and this is going to be a new string array of, we'll go 1,000. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and fill this guy up. For int I is equal to 0, I is less than the string. I'm going to call that strings dot length I plus plus, and we'll say the strings at bucket I is equal to string concatenate with an I. So it'd be string 0, string 1, string 2, string 3, just giving me unique strings. That makes sense? All right, so what does this code right here do? This guy creates a collection of 1,000 unique strings. What is this guy? This guy is capable of showing a collection of things on the screen. But now we need to have some way of getting this guy and this guy to talk to each other. We have to integrate those two separate pieces. Make sense?
Yeah.
So we have something called an array adapter. What does an array adapter do? This guy adapts an array, I'm going to say collection type, to a list view. Visual representation. Make sense? That's what that guy does. Now, I'm going to go ahead and bring up, we're printing a giant bust of a stormtrooper. 20 inch by 20 inch for the helmet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's serious stuff, man. Black helmet's cool too.
Yeah, but we're going to do this one in white, and then we're going to paint the
I always thought, like, when I watched it, those guys, like, Darth Vader's, like, personal pilots or whatever who were protecting him, I thought their helmets are cool, like the black one.
yeah, those are like the managers.
Yeah.
They're the
basically. They're like
the shift they're the
higher
shift
ups.
supervisors.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's probably
The bad ones.
They're the ones with names. All the other ones are clones.
That's
Yeah,
right.
true.
Actually, I think the shift managers might be clones as well, but they're more loyal.
They have special helmets.
Special helmets. Yeah, at the very least, they have special helmets. All right, so I'm going to look up array adapter here.
You guys should make the Royal Guards as well. I think those guys with the red masks.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
Sweet.
But they only appear in like some movies.
What do you think about the new Star Wars series, like the three they're making, like the alright?
Yeah, they're fine.
What do you think about the prequels?
Fine.
I don't know.
I mean,
People swear that the prequels are better.
yeah, these people are nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're enjoyable, but you can't beat the OG Star Wars.
I think you can. I
You
mean,
think so? Well, how do you think it's been done then? Or do you think it can do it?
here's the issue. The issue is if you're looking at it from a storyline movie perspective, you know, really breaking these things down, fine, you could probably say the old ones were better or whatever. Okay, but no way old school Luke Skywalker beats any Jedi in the new movies. Impossible. Does not happen.
Yeah, he thought
Okay?
about it.
Way better choreography and stuff like that now. So I mean, what are you doing? You're going to the theater to watch 2.5 hours of lightsaber fighting. That's what you're there for. Don't break this thing down any more than it needs to be broken down.
I would literally pay just to watch 2 hours of that. Like,
That's it.
it'd
That's
be
it.
great.
I mean, I get it. You could look for, holes in like Avengers movies and stuff like that, but you're there for explosions and to see Thor do stuff with hammers and the Hulk to destroy stuff. Who cares whether it makes sense or not? Doesn't matter. It's destruction and it's awesome.
I didn't realize it was going to strike a nerve with this. Sorry.
Being a teacher.
Your voice just made that so much better.
So-
It's like
Doing it on a
going up
Is
with
it
so much
that
emotion.
Emperor Palpatine? It's like, have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
That's going on the soundboard.
You just knew that guy was evil during that scene.
Oh, really?
You got Palpatine talking about he was a great Darth Lord of the Sith.
The fact that he has the same chin as Darth Sidious.
Yeah, but they hadn't seen Darth Sidious that often at that point.
Fair enough.
He was in hiding. Plus Darth Maul's lightsaber never made sense. You don't go around with a double-barreled lightsaber, you're going to cut thumbs off. That's just not the way it works. Right?
It's pretty smart of them, though, like, for the whole lightsaber thing, like, how it cauterizes the wound right away.
Yeah.
So there wouldn't be any blood. That's, like, genius. Like, think about it to make it, like, PG-13 or PG or whatever.
It's
Like,
like just
that, like,
genius.
literally, like, solves any plot hole there being blood. You're just like, oh, yeah, it's fixed. It's fine. Not fixed,
Yeah.
but it's closed. So,
Yeah, and to your original question, there's only the best scene in any Star Wars movie ever across all the things. There's only one correct answer, okay, and that's when Yoda fights against
what's his name? Dooku?
Dooku, Count Dooku.
Yeah.
That's the only correct answer to that question. He limps in with a cane, and also he's force pushing off walls.
Yeah.
Then he limps out with a cane.
Yeah,
That doesn't make sense.
Did you see the baby Yoda
Yeah.
from The Mandalorian? Yeah.
Plus, he took his lightsaber out with the Force. You knew it was over then.
I think is that like one of the only times you see Yoda fight?
see him fight the Emperor, but I thought that
Oh,
was
that's
stupid. I didn't think that was as good of a scene.
Yeah.
All right. Array adapters.
So anyway, back to
There's what's the name of the show? It's like that claymation. There's like some College Humor. I think it was on College Humor. It was it's a Robot Chicken. Yeah, Robot Chicken. And there's a go for Papa Palpatine. You know, he's like talking to Vader. It's a pretty funny one. And they're making like their sandwich order. You know, it's like ordering from fast food. And then he's talking to Vader about, you know, like what's an aluminum falcon? It's pretty funny. All right, so just to bring us back up to speed from 5 minutes ago, we have to have a means of getting this visual to be adapted to be interfaced with this collection of data. Make sense? That's where array adapters come in. They adapt an array for a list view. All right. So, going back to array adapter here. When we create an array adapter, these are the public constructors. Now, we're going to be looking at this guy first. So, he's going to take in a context. We've seen that before with our intent. In our world, a context is always an activity. From what activity are we doing this in? That's actually only about a half truth, but let's just roll with that for a while. All right. So the context is where we are. This resource is what do my rows look like? I'll talk about that in a second. And then this is my collection of stuff. All right. So notice here that we have an array adapter that takes an array. And we have an array adapter that takes a list as well. All right. Makes sense? But we're going to start with just the array one because that's what we've created. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say array adapter of type string. We'll call this guy adapter is equal to a new array adapter of type string. And we're going to pass it the context, which is this. Now we need to pass it a definition for what our row looks like. Now at this point, we're doing a very simple model of this. I'm going to show you how to create custom rows eventually. But we're going to use a built-in row type. So we're going to say r dot layout dot where is my give me moment? I need to look at simple row. There's a simple row. He's not where I was expecting to find him. Oh, r dot simple, yeah, Android dot r, layout simplest. Simple list item 1. So this is like a row that can only show a string. This is built into the language. And then I'm going to give it my collection. I name my collection this dot, I name my collection the strings. And we'll go ahead and let the class tell me why am I getting an error here? It's complaining about the strings. Why is it complaining about the strings?
We define the strings below.
Yeah, I haven't defined that guy yet.
Oops.
All right, so I'll go ahead and define my array adapter after that. All right, so now I have my list view. So I have the thing I intend to show my list on. Then I have my collection of stuff. Now I have my adapter set up where I want to adapt the elements of this collection to this row, to this simple layout which knows how to display a string. All right, we're not going to go any deeper into that right now. We'll create our own custom ones, but for right now, that's the way it works. And now, in order to finish my, I've gone to Home Depot. I've gotten the, the little tool that lets me take my collection and prepare it for my list view. Now I have to install it into the list view. So I'll say this dot employee LV dot set adapter to adapter. So I let the list view know who his adapter is. And now we have a collection of 1,000 strings. See how that's working?
Yeah.
Similarly, if I create a array list of strings, we'll call this guy the strings2. This is going to be a new array list of strings. And I say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than, we'll just say 1,000, I plus plus, and I'll say the strings 2 dot add. We'll call this guy an array list string concatenated with I. So now I've created an array list, which is a collection of, in this case, strings of arbitrary size. Make sense? Now for right now, well, here, let me finish doing this part first. So this guy currently has 0 elements in it, and now I've added 1,000 elements. This guy was originally built to hold 1,000 elements. I didn't have to put anything in there, but I did put 1,000 in there. But could I have said plus 100 there? Could I do 1,100 elements in something built to hold 1,000?
Yeah.
If you have a bucket up here, I can't say this, can I? I can't say 1,100 there. I can't fill the strings, this array, with 1,100 things, because it's only capable of holding 1,000. But can I fill this guy with 1,100 things? Yeah. Yeah, because he is an arbitrary collection. He's a linked data structure. Actually, I think we saw these actually implemented in terms of arrays. But from our perspective, he's destructive under the hood, but he lets me add as many things as we want. All right, so we'll just bounce back here. So I'll go ahead and put, here, we'll put 10,000 things in there. That's allowed with this guy. I'll go ahead and create a second array adapter. Array adapter of type string. We'll call this guy adapter2 is equal to a new array adapter of type string. Context will be this, android.r.layout.simple list item. And then the collection I'm going to give him is the strings 2. And notice here that this is actually my second another constructor type. So for array adapters, here's our public constructors. The one we just used was this one, whose third parameter is an array. This says it's an array of some type. We give it a string array. Now we're giving it this version of it, whose third parameter is a list type of string. If I click on list there, we'll see that an array list is one of the subclasses of that. So an array list is a list. So he can be used as input for that. Make sense? All right, so now I'll just use adapter 2 here with my list view. And we'll see that this works as well. So there's my array list 145. So now I can display any number of elements. Not necessarily a set amount of elements. I can use an array list to hold my stuff. Go ahead.
For r.id.employee.lv, I'm getting an error for that. Does that have anything to do with it being private above, like when it was?
No, it would have to do with out here in your list that you didn't give it an ID.
Okay.
By default, it had nothing here.
Okay.
You have to give it the ID. All right, questions about the, oh, go ahead.
Is there a cap on how many items a list view can hold?
I'm sure the answer is yes, but it's going to be a huge number, probably size of int. So 2 billion would be my gut feeling. But so functionally, no, there's not a cap. At that point, you probably shouldn't be using a list view. So that then becomes a human-computer interaction, user experience type question where it's like, what's the right tool for the job? If you have 20 billion things to show somebody, maybe scrolling through isn't the best way of finding stuff, right?
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so for your homework, and then I'm going to give you a hint. Make the list screen show the names of all of the employees you have entered from your add employee screen. So homework for today was to, when you add an employee, it added it to your array list, right? Now you have an array list up in your Singleton. And it just so happens that array lists can be used as the source for an array adapter. But, so here we'll say hint, array lists can be used as the source for an array adapter. But you are only allowed to use the version of ArrayAdapter that works on collections of strings. You have a collection of employees. I promise you, if you try to pass your collection of employees, it won't work. Because you know what? That array adapter was written way before you wrote your employee class. It doesn't know what your employee is. We're going to have to create a special version of it to work on employees. So the only version you have of ArrayAdapter is the one that can take collections of strings as a parameter. Notice I'm asking you to show the names of all your employees. You currently have an array list of employees. You have an adapter that can take an array list of strings.
Right.
I want you to show the names. Connect the dots.
Oh, adapter.
Go ahead.
The array adapter that works on the strings, that's the one we just used.
Yep, I showed you one that works on an array of strings as well as an array list of strings. Yep. To make it work for employees, which we'll do next time, we'll have to make our own custom version of ArrayAdapter. It won't be hard, but we're not allowed to use that for this assignment. So what I don't want to see in submissions is you going out and Googling, finding somebody else who's used an ArrayAdapter, called My Employee Adapter, that does the things we're going to learn next class to do this. You're having to solve a problem given the tools that are in your toolbox. The tool you have is an ArrayAdapter that can show lists of strings. What you have is a list of employees. Hook those up to make the employee names show up. Make sense? Questions, comments, concerns, bribes? All right, see everybody on Tuesday. I'll go ahead and push the current version of the code up.